Tuesday, you already know what time it is. It's R3's time where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge and self through education and activism. And what better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own understanding. So we're going to jump right into it. I know it's a little bit late in the day, but this is a perfect way for you to join as we extended our time for you guys. So we will be jumping into The History of White People is our next read. This book is by Nell Irvin Painter. And when I say this is an excellent book, I've already read this book, and it's very important that we dive deep into this book once again in order to bring out the foundations of racism, but also what that means in society today. So a lot of people don't understand that race was actually a man-made construct, just like things similar to religion. So we're going to start reading about Nell Irvin Painter's version of The History of White People as we go ahead and discover that race actually started off with white people. But I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder, and we use our real eyes. Our mission is to promote knowledge of self through education and activism. So we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She's going to let you know a little bit of the logistics, and then I'll be back.
Hey, is Howard so? Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh, I can't see me. Do you see me? Can you see? Oh, anyway, wait. I don't know what's going on. I can't see.
Just we can see you.
See me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me put you guys up here. I'm in the kitchen cooking rice. Hi, this is Dana. I was Solos with Moses. Here I'm coming at you at R3 Real Lives Book Club, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. Boom, boom. Activism can be bam, bam, on your mind. Every Tuesday, we meet. Times may change, but we don't play. We're the same game every Tuesday. Right now, we're reading The History of Whiteness. She explained. We're going to start off today by going into the reasons for the book, and you're going to hear from the author herself, who discusses the history of whiteness. And what that means is it's going to take us through complex origins and evolving concepts of whiteness, race, and exploring how societal structures have defined and redefined what it means to be white throughout history. I find it interesting that the bar always moved. Before, you had all these separate groups. You know, you had Slavs, you had Germans, you had Irish, you had Italians. And then when it was convenient, someone decided for all these groups to just together be white, okay? And not just be each other because they needed their group to be bigger. And so the same goes for how East Asians from India come here, and on their birth certificates from India and their certificates when they come here, they're classified as white, the Indians from Southeast Asia. So anyway, I'm going to enrich our discussion. We're going to be watching the video, and we're going to try to get a deeper understanding. It's going to be very challenging because these are terms and concepts or ways of thinking that people are not really necessarily used to. And a lot of times our race is centered around Black people and our race, and not understanding that this construct of race it's only basically in America and in Europe, supposedly. But, you know, if you go other places, there was no concept of race. There was an identity of where you come from, who your people are. You know, like Black people in Nigeria, they don't call themselves Black. They are Yoruba. They are Igbo. They are different things. They are not Black. They are who they are, their culture. And so, anyway, we'll see how this book turns out. I've never read it, so I will be reading with you at our Real Lives Book Club every Tuesday. Back to you, kid.
All right, perfect.
I'm sorry. Oh, no, I can say that for the end. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. And you know where to find us: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. But she'll let you know a little bit more on how to find us later at the end, like she said. So we're going to jump right into it. Before we watch a little quick recap of the book or introduction of the book from the author's words herself. I'm just going to go over just a few things with you. So we always read the introduction or the summary of the book. So it's important that if you have this book you're going to be reading along with us, just make sure you get the introduction into your system so you're able to grasp the information that we're going to be going through. Like our hostess with the Moses said, we're going to be talking about a very complex term. It wasn't just necessarily white and black at that time. So one thing I wanted to put is there's two different types of racism when it comes to the concept of whiteness. So in America, whiteness or being called a Caucasian was always equated with beauty. But we were able to actually identify two terms of racism due to slavery. They always equated blackness with being enslaved or a slave, and they equated whiteness or the Caucasians with the terms of beauty but also freedom. So we're going to be able to see different pictures. We're going to speak about different people from not only the African diaspora but also some of the European, some of these I don't want to call them scholars at this time, but some of the people who came up with these terms of racism, and I won't say their names yet because I don't want to jump too far ahead of the book, even though I've already read it. We're going to take it slow. So some portions in the introduction, I'm just going to read out loud to you for those who may just be catching us and you're not going to read along. It's important that you grasp just a few topics that we're going to be discussing. So I'll just read a little bit of page 1 of the introduction, then I'll jump around, of course, and give you some of the good quotes that I love to let you know about. But we're going to just be starting on page 1. So of the introduction, it says, I might have, and this is the author speaking to her readers, I might have entitled this book Constructions of White Americans from Antiquity to the Present because it explores a concept that lies within a history of events. I have chosen this strategy because race is an idea, not a fact, and its questions demand answers from the conceptual rather than the factual realm. American history offers up a large bounty of commentary on what it means to be non-white, moving easily between alternations in the meaning of race as color, from color to Negro to Afro-American to black and to African-American. And I just want to stop there because if you are my age group in 1990, you look at your birth certificate, it says one thing. Your parents' birth certificate will say another. Your grandparents' birth certificate will say another. And these are how race has moved in and out of the black community as well, going from color to Negro to Afro-American to black and to African-American. And now we're also seeing it actually change a little bit now because now people are trying to take away that aspect. If you look at social media and the trends that are happening and disconnect themselves completely with Africa and call themselves Native or Indigenous Americans. So we're starting to see this race thing come up into play again and again. So it's important that we get the foundations on where it came from and why it came from that place. So it goes on to say that, but little attention has been paid to the histories equally confused and flexible discourses on the white races, the old slave trade from Eastern Europe. I use white races in the plural because for the most of the past centuries, when race really came down to matters of law, educated Americans firmly believed in the existence of more than one European race. It is possible and important to investigate that the other side of history without trivializing the history we already know so well. Let me state categorically that while this is not the history in white versus black, I do not by any means underestimate or ignore the overwhelming importance of the black race in America. I am familiar with the truly gigantic literature that explains the meaning, importance, and honest-to-God reality of the existence of race when it means black. In comparison with this preoccupation, statutory and biological definitions of white race remain notoriously vague, the leavings of what is not black. But this vagueness does not indicate lack of interest, quite to the contrary, for another vast historical literature, much less known today, explains the meaning, importance, and the honest-to-God reality of the existence of white races. So what she's saying is she's not taking away that black a race as itself, what it means to us today when we say we are black or are we proud. But a lot of people, especially in the African diaspora, have to understand that race actually primarily was not used for black people period. It actually didn't even count us at the time. This was for Europeans and the Scythians and the Greeks in order to divide themselves up and say who was the most pure blood. If you heard that terminology going on during the Black Lives Matter movement, or even now with the politics that are happening, they're always talking about who's the most purest American, who's the most purest of the blood, right? So think of concepts of race of the oppressors at this time. We're going to put it we're going to put it in that terminology. The oppressors at this time were trying to and fighting each other, battling each other, similar to in America with the Civil War. It wasn't a civil war against black people. It was a civil war amongst themselves. So think of it as that. I'm just going to read a little bit more. This introduction is not long, so I'll just skate through it and then we'll watch the videos. It says on page 5, it may seem odd to begin a book on Americans in antiquity, a period long before Europeans discovered the Western Hemisphere and thousands of years before the invention of the concept of race. But given the prevalence of the notion that race is permanent, many believe it's possible to trace something recognizable as a white race back more than 2,000 years. In addition, not a few Westerners have attempted to racialize antiquity, making ancient history into white race history, and classics into a lily white field complete with pictures of the blonde ancient Greeks. Transforming the ancients into Anglo-Saxons' ancestors made classics unwelcoming to African American classics. The blonde ancient Greek narrative may no longer be taught in schools, but it lives on as a myth to be confronted in these pages. Before launching the trip back to ancient times, however, it may be useful to make a few remarks about the role of science or science of race. I resist the temptation to place the word science, even theories, and assertion of the most spurious and pernicious and ridiculous kind in quotation marks for the task of deciding what is sound science and what is cultural fantasy will quickly become all-consuming. And that's why I said, too, I don't want to call the people that we're going to be referring to, like Ralph Ellison, as a scholar. But this was more like a fantasy that they were having, and they came out to make these works that end up being what the societal standard is now of race. Better to note, this is the bottom last paragraph, page 5. Better to note the qualifications of yesterday's scientists than to brand a mere science. Their thought that was not stood the test of time. I give scholars of the repute in their day pride of the place in my pages, no matter that some of their thinking has fallen by the wayside. Today we think of race as a matter of biology, but a second thought reminds us that the meaning of race quickly spill out of merely physical categories. Even in so circumscribed a place as one book, the meanings of white race reach into the concepts of labor, gender, class, and images of personal beauty that seldom appear in analysis of race. Works plays a central part in race talk because the people who do the work are likely to be figured as inherently deserving the toil and poverty of laboring status. It is still assumed wrongly that slavery anywhere in the world must rest on the foundation of racial difference. Time and again, the better classes have concluded that those people deserve their lot. It must be something within that puts them at the bottom. In modern times, we recognize this kind of reasoning as it relates to the black race. But in other times, the same logic was applied to people who were white, especially when they were impoverished immigrants seeking work. And remember, too, if you know about the history of America, it was people fleeing their own country, whether it was overtaxation that was happening, or the criminals that did not want to be punished in their own country and their continent, and they came to America to make a new world. So remember that when you're speaking about race and equating that with black people. It did not have anything to do at the time with the concept of black people being in it, but it was only for white people to divide themselves. Who was the most purest, who was the most wealthy, who was the most deserving of these certain benefits of freedom, right? And they also equated, again, in America, the term Caucasian as a standard of beauty. But we'll be able to see that later on in the chapters. And so it says on page 6, those at the very bottom were slaves. Slavery had helped construct concepts of white race in two contradictory ways. First, American tradition equates whiteness with freedom while co-signing blackness to slavery. The history of unfree white people slumbers in popular forgetfulness. Though white slavery, like black slavery, moved people around and mixed up human genes on a massive scale, the important demographic role of the various slave trades is all too often overlooked as a historical force. In the second place, the term Caucasian as a designation for white people originates in the concepts of beauty related to the white slave trade from Eastern Europe, and whiteness remains embedded in the visions of beauty found in art history and popular culture. And remember last week, or last book we read, we spoke about propaganda and how this propaganda was actually used in order to put down black people during politics and political scenes, right? They were using it in order to justify their racist ways, right? And in this turn, we're seeing how race was a standard of beauty, so they started using art as a way to influence what it meant to be white, what it meant to be beautiful at this time, okay? So then it goes on to say, the bottom of page 6, today most Americans envision whiteness as racially indivisible, though ethnically divided. This is the scheme anthropologists laid out in the mid-20th century. By this reckoning, there were only 3 real races. So by this time, it was only 3 real races: Mongoloid, Negroid, and Caucasoid, okay? But countless ethnicities today, however, biologists and geneticists, not to mention literary critics, no longer believe in the physical existence of races, though they recognize the continuing power of racism. The belief that races exist and that some are better than the others. It took some 2 centuries to reach this conclusion, after countless racial schemes have spun out countless different numbers of races, even of the white races, and attempts at classification produce frustration. Although science today denies race any standing as objective truth, and the U.S. Census faces taxonomic meltdown, many Americans cling to race as the unschooled cling to the superstition. So long as racial discrimination remains a fact of life and statistics can be arranged to support racial difference, the American belief in races will endure. But confronted with the actually existing American population, its distribution of wealth, power, and beauty, the notion of American whiteness will continue to evolve as it has since the creation of the American Republic. So that gives you just a synopsis of what we're going to be discussing, but how beauty and whiteness was always in America with white people, right? It was always given to the Caucasian. That term was made for America in the first place, and it equated it to freedom, but also into beauty. And then slavery was equated to blackness. So they put us into these categories that they had amongst themselves in the first place. So I always tell people, never be mad when people try to call you certain names, because the race terminology was used to break themselves up before we were even here to claim it, okay? And we'll be able to see a chart as well that I always show people when I'm having these discussions, that we weren't even considered on the race scale. We were at the way bottom, but you'll see that later in the chapter. So what I'm going to do is make sure you guys read chapter 1. We'll get through the Greeks and the Scythians, and we'll be able to discover, this is for next week, we'll be able to start getting the ethnicities and races down from the beginning to the end. And if you know anything about African history, as the African diaspora, the Greeks stole basically everything that they actually know from Kemet, also known as Ethiopia, Kush. We were all things, but they stole all of their information from Kemet, Egypt. Egypt is a Greek term. Kemet was the African term, and there's other terminologies if you go back in time, but that gives you the basis. So I'm going to see if I can bring up quickly the video. Now, she put it in the link. You might not be able to see it when I bring it up, only because it's in this. It's not allowing me to share like it does on the other one, but we're going to try it.
I can try to share it myself.
No, I can share it, but it's not allowing me to share it with you. So you can hear it, is what I'm saying. This is...
No, I'm saying I can share it.
I have it. It's right here. You just won't be able to watch it. So let me bring it up. 1 second.
But it's words, you can share it so we can watch it. That's all I'm
saying. Excuse me.
We've been talking about blacks under whatever words
we
use for like 300 years. So we have a very...
You can't hear it?
No.
Let's see.
Allow me to share.
I can't do it on here. It's let me see. One moment, R3, as we just going to bring up the video. Unable to start video at this time. Mirror my video. Sending video. How do I do this? It's not showing me how to do it anymore. How can I make you the hostess? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I did it before. What did I do? Oh, maybe I went here. Okay, you're the host now, so see if you can share it. All right, so we're going to watch a video from the author, Nell Irvin Painter. She's a black woman at that. Love this book again. This book is excellent, excellent. So while she's pulling that video up, I'm just going to read to you guys. Oh, here we go. Okay, perfect. Just press play on that.
Wait a minute.
And when you share, you have to put the sound. Share the sound at the bottom. It's different, though, on the phone, so you might have it.
I don't know why. I've watched the whole video earlier. Let's try this again.
If you can't do it, I'll just play it, and they can listen to it since you've already seen it. So this video is about how to talk about whiteness. Again, we just briefly touched on it, guys. R3. And so the way you talk about whiteness is very important, especially in this society today. People use this as a very sensitive topic or a topic to target certain groups of people. But it's about time that we get down to the foundation of what whiteness truly is, where it derived from, the foundations of it, and how it was used. And again, we already spoke about it in the beginning of the introduction, but Miss Nell Irvin Painter really breaks down how whiteness in Europe and the Europeans were different than the whiteness that was brought here to America. So the whiteness that was brought here to America was used to justify slavery. At the same time, it was slavery over there too, but again, this country was built on either people running from taxation, criminals that came and started this country, and they were using this to justify their freedom and their rights away from the crown. So we have to put that in perspective when we're reading this book. Keep your ears open, use your real eyes, make sure you're able to point out some terms. So while she's pulling that up as well, just a few things to go over again on page 6. American tradition equates whiteness with freedom while co-signing blackness to slavery. The term Caucasian was used as a designation for concepts of beauty. And at this time in the mid-20th century, there was only 3 types of races. And that was Mongoloid, Negroid, and Caucasoid. And so now we're facing these type of terminologies again today. So it's important that we understand. I'm going to go ahead and play it. It looks like you're having issues there.
Go ahead.
What does that say?
Oh, wait, I got it. It's just not a...
It says your access is blocked.
There we go. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know why it won't allow me to share on the Insta. But never mind. Just go ahead. Just play.
Okay, just mute yourself. And then if you can't hear it, I'll just tell you when we're done. So let me take you off. You're going to need to cancel your... Oh, now I can't do it. Bring your screen back from sharing. Like, press stop sharing.
Yeah, I can't find it. It won't let me go back. Oh, there's an end. Okay. I'm going to leave the meeting and come back in.
Just press stop sharing.
It won't. There's no screen for that.
Oh, never mind. I
There's
see
something
replay.
going
Never
on.
mind. I see this button at the bottom. There we go. Okay, just mute yourself. You don't need to leave.
Very deep conversation around black that gives it a heft and meanings and history.
So I'm just going to start it from the beginning,
for
guys.
300 years. So we have a very deep conversation around black that gives it a heft and meanings and history. Now, white has a lot of that, but for most of the time, in classification terms, white has meant the leavings of black. So it's kind of what's left over. People who have embraced it as an identity have been awful people. They have been white nationalists, Ku Klux Klansmen, and so forth. So it's like white Americans had this choice of being either the leavings of blackness, which they did not embrace, or Klansmen, which most of them also did not embrace. And I think the mass of white people in the United States, less now than
You're gonna have to mute yourself.
before 2020.
We can't hear nothing.
I know. Just mute yourself. You already watched it, please.
Unraced individualism was well known in the United States. And it was also well known that a lot of Americans, like Henry Ford, and also many scholars, believed that Jews were a race, a separate race. And they didn't mean it in a flattering way. At that time, it was usually thought that, say, Irish people belonged to the Celtic race, East European Hebrews, and, these were all white races. But this was a moment in the very early 40s, as the United States was getting into the war, that we were desperately in need of national unity. And the two enemies were racial states.
German conquest of Europe and Africa. Japanese conquest of the Orient.
So one way of pulling all Americans into the fight against totalitarianism was to get rid of as many racial categories as possible. So the ideal was unity. And the anthropologists, the Boasian anthropologists, wrote all over the place in newspapers and books and so forth that there are only three races: the Caucasian, the Mongoloid, and the Negroid. Its motives are cultural but largely political.
Okay, so we'll actually stop there. And we'll watch it a little bit later. Are you back with us? Hostess, are you back with us? Okay, so we're only going to watch a few. It says we have about 10 minutes left on this video. So we're going to end it there. So it brought up exactly what I wanted to highlight is the three races. We are able to see those three faces: Mongoloid, Negroid, and Caucasoid. And remember, again, this was not necessarily including us at the time, but it was used to cause unity among certain groups in order to justify them overtaking certain pieces of land, such as Africa, such as Europe, and even at this time, such as America. So anything you want to add, hostess with the Moses, and we'll just end there. Make sure you guys read Greeks and Scythians. I don't want to jump into that chapter too quick because I want to give you guys the ability to actually read a little bit, to get a little bit from the chapter so you are well informed what we'll be discussing next week. Remember that I mentioned as well as not only freedom, beauty, but also purity. We hear these terminologies now like blood and soil, or we hear the terminologies like we're the pure blood. So this was all about an obsession with purity and trying to divide these certain races up, whether you're a Mongoloid or Caucasoid or Negroid. So just keep that in mind as you're reading. Two things I wanted to point out. We will be discussing the foundations of the whiteness that comes from, or the Caucasians, which derives from the word and the place of the Caucasus Mountains. And then also next week we'll bring up some of the religious texts that they were using also to justify them as being the purebloods, the purists, right? Because it was this obsession with purity at the time. So make sure you guys also review Genesis chapter 8 from the Bible, and it will give you a little bit of context of the area that we're going to be speaking about next week as well, with the Greeks and the Scythians being the first group of people that would use themselves in a racial sense. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She will let you know a little bit more how to find us. Make sure you join next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. this time around. Make sure I'll update it and let you guys know at 6:30. If she wants to add any commentary from the video, please go ahead and add that, and we'll wrap it up. So I'm going to pass it over to her.
Hello, this is Howard Soul, the hostess with the mostest. We are reading The History of Whiteness by Nell. Well, I can't remember her last name right now.
Irvin Painter.
Yes, Nell Painter, Irvine. And we just watched the video of the author's voice. Well, I didn't watch it, but you guys watched it or listened to it. Video of her idea for the book and the reasoning for it. I think it's a very good read because, like I said, also mostly the social construct of race is centered around Blackness. And we need to go back in time to figure out where it comes from. And it comes from division, separation, and togetherness at the same time. We need the numbers to get big. So we are every Tuesday at 3 is at R3 Real Life Book Clubs, where you can get us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and the YouTube channel. Also, it will get you to the website where you can like, share, follow for free on all of those platforms. Cost you $0. But if you want to donate, we have several campaigns that you can look at. Scholarship, drive-by clothing drives for unhoused people. If you want to donate to any of those, we can take $1, $10. You can have as many zeros as you want. And we will make sure that money goes out to the community. We are a nonprofit, and we also include this book club and other activities that we'll be more than welcome to take your feedback and input on. And if you want to join us, or you just want to join, sometimes you might not want to be on Zoom. If you want to join virtually by sending us a message, we will get back to you. And you can send a message on all of the platforms listed above. And you can also email us through the website. So we're doing The History of Whiteness by Nell
Irvin Painter.
Well, Nell Irvin Painter. I got it. Nell Irvin Painter. And I think it's a very good read, especially in these times that we are in now, when the division on race is not, I'm not going to say it's worse than ever, because it's not possibly worse than, but the mask of the race is being unveiled, and we're going back in time to a place that some people don't want to. And if we keep marching backwards, I'm not going to get too political, because we are a nonprofit and that is not our mission. Our mission is knowledge itself through education and activism. And one way you can do that is by reading a book. You could be an activist in the street and march, or you could be an activist in your mind and read and learn, so you can teach your children, your grandchildren, nieces and nephews, the real history of their self, of the countries, not just the United States, because we are United States centered, but this is a whole world. We are a speck in the world, and sometimes we need to expand our knowledge to that. But anyway, this is at R3 Realize, where every Tuesday you can get the updates. If you sign up on the on the website, you will be updated to our meeting times and a link to join us. So we'll see you Tuesdays. Peace.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, like she said, make sure you join us next week, Tuesdays, the third day of the week. We are reading, let me show you the book, The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. Again, this is like a go-to Bible for me when I'm having discussions of race. It really gives us a lot of information on the concepts of race and the foundation of race and the people who created race and the reasons why they created race. Remember some of the things that we've already talked about in introduction, as well as purity was a topic of discussion, because these people were obsessed with purity. Also, the term of beauty enter into Americans' terminology of racism, but also freedom equated with whiteness. And then also they used it to justify slavery and equating everything to do with slavery being enslaved with blackness. We also will be speaking about how there were some people that were white that were slaves, also come from the Slav region as well. But this is on the term of racism and whiteness and breaking each other down. Whoever was on a certain level on the totem pole was supposed to be these slaves. So we'll be able to get into the concepts. I just wanted to throw that out there. Keep your brains open, keep your mind open, and use your R3 real eyes when you read. And don't forget, next week we are going to read chapter 1. And if you're feeling like you are Superman, Superwoman out there, make sure you guys read chapter 1 and 2, because I'll touch on a little bit of chapter 2. So chapter 1 is Greek and Scythians, and chapter 2 will introduce you guys to the Romans, Celts, the Gauls, and the Germans. Okay, so we will catch you guys next week. Thank you for joining. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. Peace, or we say 3.
Praise. Praise.
Make sure you read. Purchase your book now. Oh, and lastly, before I forget, we're going to start incorporating how we sell hostess with the Moses. But if you're going to be joining us and purchasing books, before we go, make sure you guys make an Amazon Smile account out there. A lot of people create Amazon accounts. They shop continuing daily. I put it in our invite. Anything that you buy off of Amazon, from razors to soaps to whatever you're buying, shaving your legs, household goods, anything off of Amazon, if you sign up through and make an Amazon Smile account and choose us, R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives is also tagged in our bio, the full name of us. We are a 501c3 organization, and Amazon will donate 0.5% or 0.5% of whatever you purchase to our organization. So you don't even have to do anything. You can just shop and get 0.5% donated to R3. So make sure you guys choose us as your nonprofit. See you next week. We are R3.